Well, seeing as how episode 1 went over pretty well, we're gonna go ahead and do more, because I want to do this entire challenge and maybe make a mega compilation in the end. Now, to keep this intro short, let's just jump right in. Wait, what are you? Who are you? What are you doing here?
I believe you know exactly who I am and what I'm here to do. You know it, but you're too afraid to admit it.
What do you mean?
Shut up! I need to ask your viewers a question.
You can't just come here and...
I told you to shut up! Now, dear viewers, are you enjoying the content that this creator is providing you? If you are, I must ask you to do something for me.
No, you can't do this! I can't let you do...
I'm afraid it's too late for that now. I must ask you to subscribe! For if you don't, the future is in peril.
No! No! Wait, that... Never mind.
And with that, I take my leave.
Well, that was certainly something. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get right into the video. We got some jumps to save and some jumps to hopefully not make. We're going to begin this journey off by going back to level 1, as I actually made a grave error in realizing that there was a way for me to save that jump. Most of these levels, if you haven't already realized, are very circular and can go both ways, so instead of having to make this jump over the flowers that I had before, I actually could have just turned around and climbed up the edges that were there before, allowing me to eat the giant spaceship UFO thing without actually needing to get past that area. I feel kind of dumb realizing this now, but at least I realized it before I finished the video and said that I had 2 jumps still left. I did make an attempt to try and go back into level 2 to see if there was anything I could do, anything I missed, maybe some sort of damage I could take to try and get on top of the big cannon, but unfortunately, I couldn't find a single thing, and, well, I guess we'll just have to move on until we can find out some new techniques if there are any. Time to head on to World 3, the Gulp Sea. We're welcome to the giant open ocean with these metal piranhas. I mean, I guess they're still technically food, but in robotic form, so it counts, I suppose. The Great Elder decides to challenge us to a fishing competition, and you know, no one's gonna beat my butt when there's a lot of food on the line. So, we're gonna do this and we're gonna beat him for sure. The goal here is plain and simple. We have to eat these fish to try and progress and collect 100 of them in total. Now, that's not that hard of a goal, and there are actual pirates here. I don't exactly know what fruit or vegetable they're based around, but, you know, actual pirates, rather than just random space pirates that look like fruits and vegetables. Anywho, this is also the first time we're introduced to a new mode, Speed Mode. There's not really any jumps required with this ability, and it just makes us move fast to catch things easier. I will not be counting this against us in any way. If we use a ramp to gain a little bit of height, it doesn't really count as a jump when we're just gaining the height off of the land. This is where I started realizing some of these nuts were going to be harder to get than others, as I couldn't reach this one with my current size, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be possible for me to get big enough to grab it, but we'll see about that later. I don't know if it's just me, or do these, like, radishes or whatever scream like anime antagonists, like some sort of like semi-villain antagonistic group, you know, with the giant watermelon in the background with this club. I was gonna use the like action anime, but you know, I don't have premium, so unfortunately I can't use that effect, so it's not as funny now. Here's our first hurdle, and I mean major hurdle. Boats. I thought they wouldn't be too bad, as there was a little bit of me being able to levitate just a tiny bit. However, for some reason with boats, you just can't get over them, and it's probably because of their outward edges rather than their inward edges, or just solid flat walls. I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but it became a big issue, and I don't know if I was going to be able to pass it or not. However, instead of giving up this time, I decided to turn back and see if there's another way around. There's a bunch of tunnels that you can dig that actually go under the water and bring you to areas you wouldn't normally be able to access without jumping over the boats. And we did eventually manage to get them all, surprisingly. I was scared for a moment that it wasn't going to happen. Here we are, down to 3. There wasn't many left, but we just had to use our radar and our minds to find the last few. And not jump, of course. I did try to use a little bit of an island boost to get over these, but it didn't really work. So we just ended up using little tunnels to get through anyways. At this point, we tell the Grand Master that we caught 100 fish and that he sucks because he didn't catch any at all. Now, with it being scripted and all, I mean, there's not really another outcome, but we're just going to say he sucks anyways to make ourselves feel better about how bad we're doing right now, with only 1 jump, of course. I mean that sarcastically. I just wish there was some way to get rid of that jump. For our next level, we open up into the ocean depths. Quite beautiful, quite, well, blue at least. It's got a lot of enemies, it's got a lot of acorns, and it's got some blocking paths. How are we supposed to get past those exactly? We eat a few enemies like we do with most other levels, and decide to go and jump down to see if we can get through this little current here. Now, however, we are not fat enough, nor large enough, nor will ever be big enough to get through it alone. So we've got to progress in another way. It is here we are told that there are comically large weights that can allow us to get down easily. But why these are here, I don't know. And why chomping on their ends doesn't break our teeth, I will never know either. Honestly, there isn't a ton to talk about in this level. It's a pretty simple one. Other than eating a few more of these anime blade wielder veggies, it's pretty simple. We just run through, grab the acorns, take the weights down, and get some more items. Grow in size, fight the boss, I mean, standard level 2 things. But there's a couple things I learned here that I had forgotten about previously. Here's where I accidentally remind myself of a feature I didn't realize I had before. The Z button. It allows you to lock onto enemies and most objects and just be able to munch towards them, and that includes up, which is a very useful tool. This might be able to be used on something later, huh? Wink wink nudge nudge. Once we make it to the bottom, we realize there's a giant robot harassing the locals, and that the majestic legendary orb is nowhere to be found. However, our level is only 120, and we can't get any higher than that. Man, if we were doing a no-dash run, we definitely wouldn't be able to achieve it, as I'm pretty sure this boss is required to be crushed. I'm not sure there's a way around it, unfortunately. But that's not what we're doing today. We're doing min jumps, and this one required none. If it wasn't obvious before, here's the part I was hinting at. We go back into level 2 to try out this new Z trick to see if it may work on this barrel part. I mean, it works on most other things. Power-ups, small fruit that you can use to travel on, and definitely enemies, so why wouldn't it work on this? At first it didn't seem to want to work, so I tried to go ahead and get to sizes that were larger than what its level cap was, just in case that might have been it. I wandered around for a couple minutes, tried to look around and get everything I could. However, for some reason, this is one of the very few items that's just not Z-lockable for some reason. I don't know why, and I don't know how they didn't program it the same way, but unfortunately it's still not grabbable, requiring one jump. Alright, let's progress on to the boss fight. It's gonna be the Big Fishy. And there's definitely something fishy about him, considering he's also a robot. Why aren't they just regular fish? I don't really know, but maybe it'll explain it later. He may be a fish, but you might as well call him related to Sonic the Hedgehog with moves like this. This boss is plenty exploitable like many others. I mean, you just hit him, make him mad, run him into a wall, and boom! There's his weak spot. Pretty simple, pretty easy, but again, this is a game for kids. I said that on Mario 64 though, and we saw where that got me. Crash him into the wall just a few more times, and boom, we've got him down. Not too difficult, as all things put it, and honestly, it was one of the easier bosses overall. Also, if you couldn't tell, very easily, no jumps required. Big scary dark face man shows up and decides to talk to us once again. Well, not us, but the protagonist, to explain some things, trying to figure out what happened to his robot. Now, he did explain that it is his robot and it's not programmed to go off like this, so something had to have happened and taken care of his machinery. Now, who or what that was, who knows? Couldn't be me. You guessed it, it's time for us to move right on to World 4, Blue Sky. As you could probably tell, this blue sky has a lot to do with floating islands, which doesn't bode well for our quest if we have to jump a few times to get on top of them. Let's just hope that's not what's required as we progress. As we begin though, this, I don't know what to call it, we're gonna say duck, tells us that it needs to get home to its family, but can't get across these floating bridges because, well, they're not out right now. So we've got to flick these switches to get these boats to move and get us across. Let's get it done. So, here's the gimmick of this world. These weather switches. They make it between sunny and cloudy, and clouds can help us get around platforms, whereas sunny can help us get underneath the clouds to unveil certain things. Very helpful, very useful, but let's just hope these clouds aren't in a weird position for us. Again, with the level scaling in this game, it's just kinda weird. These enemies were significantly larger than I was, and I'd just gotten to this area. Now, it may have been wanting me to progress and then come back, but I'm not that kind of guy, unfortunately. However, what I think I've learned is that if you do consume larger enemies without popping them, you do gain more experience to level up to your next rank. But, unfortunately, I just don't like coming back to areas if I can avoid it. Hitting the button on the right, we take the heart cannon, and I'm realizing now that each of these trees here are actually card suits. Huh, surprising I never thought about that before until more recently. Here's the last ability of the game. It could be called the cutter, it could be called the sonic spin dash, but what they call it in this game is spin mode. Basically how it works is you cut enemies in half as if you were dashing into them, but much faster and more efficiently. The difference here though, is that when you try to let them refuse, they don't. So this gives you as much advantage and time as you need to try and go consume them. Shooting back to the first island, we now are large enough to hit the button at the very beginning that moves the boat here. We can now progress to the next two cannons, which will hopefully help us make a lot more progress. Here's the dilemma though. We actually have enough size to hit either side, but unfortunately I don't know which one to choose. I decided to go with the left one as it is the lower level one, so progressional wise it makes sense that that would be the one they would want us to take first. Everything's going smoothly until we make it here, to this area with the clouds and these little floating islands. Unfortunately, much like the boat situation, these islands are kind of like an inversion of the normal hills that we're able to just walk up. Now, the problem with that is that there is no way to even get a little bit of height. Unlike the boats where we could get some height and maybe somehow clip on top of them, these actually had no way of doing any of the hovering effects. We had to add not one, not two, but 3 jumps to our score, which quadruples the amount of jumps we have so far. That's not good. What are you gonna do though? Progress, I suppose. We're gonna go ahead and hit this switch, hit this button that allows us to get to the bottom cannon that we didn't have access to before, and keep moving on. Out of curiosity though, I decided to go ahead and take the other path just to see what was over there. Everything seemed fairly normal, the only difference was that I didn't have to use any jumps to get over here. Huh, how strange. Wait a second, this area seems familiar. Wait, isn't that the switch from before? The one that allowed us to get across. Wait a second. Wait, this path didn't require any jumps, so if I could just use this path and take it across rather than doing the original path, then I've got to restart. Do this again, with no jumps. Using the top right cannon and taking a similar route to what we did before, we required no jumps to get back over here. Now, we have 0 jumps and can continue the level with at least 3 less than we were supposed to have. Now it's actually time to take the bottom left cannon and see where we go. This way we should hopefully be able to get that boat. And sure enough, we easily have enough size to hit the button and get it to move. But before we leave this area, there was one of those acorns on top of that tree I wanted to get. You know, the one you saw as we were launching over here. Now, you can see the game's trying to push us up there, but unfortunately it's a little bit too high without a jump. But if we use a dash, we are able to get up just slightly onto the edge of it, but it's still not quite enough. But, as you can see here, munching actually gives us a little bit of height. How this works exactly, I'm not entirely sure, but if you're on a slanted slope and you're not normally supposed to be able to stay there, munching just gives you enough height to progress upwards. I might have to try that on the cannon. Well, with that, we decided to go ahead and go to the finish line, as our goal isn't necessarily to need everything and complete 100% right now, just to see what the minimum amount of jumps is. As I said before though, that munching trick is something we might need to try on the cannon. I'm not giving up on this yet. I really want to try and have a 0 jumps run, but I still don't even know what's upcoming yet. But the more we can save now, the better off we'll be. Yeah, so the munching didn't exactly work, unfortunately. So I decided to try one last thing before to give up on this. I figured if you could potentially push a vegetable far enough to it and knock it into the air using your dash, you could munch upwards just enough to be able to do the munch tech to, you know, get on top. Although, I don't know how possible this is. It feels almost there, and I had a couple of really close attempts, but nothing was quite close enough. I feel like if you had a task, you might be able to pull this off, but as a human, it's just not possible with this specific tech. With that, I suppose it's time for level 2 of the Islands in the Sky. There's only a few things of note here, as not really much happened, and for what it's worth, I don't think we had any jumps here. Once we made it to the main island of the lighthouse, we come across this enemy that I kind of figured I'd be able to pop and maybe eat, but unfortunately he's flying a little too high. Thankfully thankfully eating everything in the game isn't necessarily a requirement, so we're really not going to worry about it right now. We'll just keep going and maybe come back to it if we have to. The only other major thing of note in this level is that if I had managed to get just a few more levels from, I don't know, an enemy that I could have potentially eaten earlier, there's a chance I could have actually eaten this big boss bird in one bite, which would have been oh so satisfying and scrumptious, but unfortunately it just didn't work out, so we had to pop it and eat it in the end. And with that, we're on to our second and final boss of the day, the Helicantaloupe. And I get it, it's supposed to be a helicopter that's a cantaloupe, but like, these food puns are kinda mid, but they're great in the end also. This boss actually ends up being easier than the fish boss, so I decided to go and have some fun with it, and ignore his weak spot and decide to eat all of his chunks to fly off of him instead, trying to gain as much size as possible just to play around and mess with him. Eventually though, we do manage to break off enough chunks, eat them, and become larger than he ever dreamt to be. It wasn't too difficult thankfully, and all things considered I only took damage a couple times, just mostly from me being kinda silly, but he's gone now. With that, Big, Dark, and Scary finally shows back up to address the situation. However, he's a little too late once again, and is seriously concerned about what's going on here, as this shouldn't be happening. He's worried that maybe his minions are actually being defeated, rather than, leaving all the work up to their minions, like he's been doing the whole time. After that long-winded cutscene from the big bad who wants to talk so much, he decides to, wait, what's going on? He's talking to us. He's finally figured out that we've actually been causing trouble and has come to confront us directly. But it turns out this is actually a friend of ours. Quote-unquote, friend. We also learn that this big machine isn't really as big as we think it is. It's run by a smaller man known as Don Onion. And unfortunately, if his machine was working for him, we would probably be squashed easily right now. Thankfully for us, we are easily able to get away since he's been having some issues. Well, we live for another day, and his minions will not. Well, that's that for today. Let's go and take a look at our jumps count. Somehow we managed to not only have 0 jumps this episode, but actually 1 less than the previous. We only had 1 jump today. That's kind of impressive actually. I wish there was some way to get rid of it, but until I know a little bit more about this game, it seems to be impossible. Well, it's getting late, and I should be getting to bed. You guys have a great day, or a great night depending on where you're at, and I'll see you later.